Hey everybody, this is Dave from the Dave in the Morning Show, and I want to let you know that I tune in every week to listen to a great podcast right here on UFO Buster Radio. That's right, I go to the website ufobusterradio.com and also tune in to all kinds of different platforms. Oh yeah, these guys are going out of this world.
The views expressed on this podcast are that of the host. This topic of UFOs is full of governments, charlatans, thieves, and loads of shit. For your listening enjoyment, put on your tinfoil hat, turn off all the lights in the home, and sit in complete silence because the probe is armed. Don't be scared if you're touched. Lastly, the UFO talk is explicit and your virgin mind is about to get fried. Let's get the show started.
Welcome to UFO Buster Radio with your host, Manny Moonraker and Big O. Now, this is episode 22, and today is a good day. What about you, Manny? How you doing?
It's a fantastic day, and we have Jim Marlin on the line. But before we get started with him, let's let the people know this is our second attempt in trying to record this episode. All of a sudden, we've had a lot of random technical issues that we've never experienced before, and I think Jim Marlin might have an answer for that. And Jim, sorry we've had to restart a second time, but go ahead and let people know who you are.
Well, I'm from Texas, and from Central Texas. I've spent most of my life in the music business, promoting concerts, and I started out in the club business. I had the first two clubs on 6th Street in Austin, and I promoted Willie Nelson's first picnic in Dripping Springs. And then I toured with him, off and on for 8 years. And, we were good friends. And we spent a lot of time experimenting with various drugs, trying to reach different levels of consciousness. And we succeeded very successfully. I guess I should tell you that the reason that we're probably having problems is I have a friend who is an alien, and I've known him all my life. I try to ask him questions about everything, and he blocks my mind. He lives 10 miles away from me. When I had him come to my house, and I was going to ask him all these questions, driving me crazy. And I said, he's got to answer some of these questions. Every time I'd go to ask him a question, he would block my mind. My mind would go blank. And I said, man, I asked him, I said, don't do this, man. Stop blocking my mind. He just smiled at me. And I think he may be interfering with this program. We'll find out if this works or not.
That could be it, actually, because, like I said, we never had all these issues before. So let's start it from the beginning again. When did you first started, feeling like you've been having these encounters or experiences?
When I was in elementary school, these aliens would come through the wall at night in my room. And I'd be paralyzed. I couldn't move. I couldn't speak. And they would take me right through the wall and take me to a spaceship. And, I have no memory of this. Continued to happen. And, as soon as they would leave, I was able to scream. And my parents would come running into the room, and I would tell them, I've been abducted by these creatures. I was just in elementary school. And I said, they take me right through the wall, and they come right through the wall. And, of course, my parents told me I was just having bad dreams. But it went on. And finally, my mother told me, she said, look, nobody can go through a wall, so you're having a bad dream. So I just wrote it off to them. And then years later, in 1976, I was promoting a big outdoor concert in Proctor, Texas. Late one afternoon, right about sunset, these two friends of mine that I grew up with showed up, and they lived pretty far away from where I lived. Kind of unusual for them to show up, like they did. And they told me that they wanted to show me something.
Okay.
And they told me to put my kids, my two boys, in the back of the El Camino, and we'd drive down to the lake, and they'd show me whatever it was they were going to show me. So we drove down to the lake, and I found a secluded spot. I got out and walked out and looked at the water, and turned around. I said, okay, what do you want to show me? And they said, well, look behind you. And I turned around, and there's this metallic object, huge. It wasn't that huge. It was probably about, say, 30 feet long and probably 10 feet tall. And it was football shaped, only there were no curved lines. It was all straight lines, and there were no seams, no windows, no doors, and it made absolutely no sound, and it was just suspended about 4 or 5 feet off the water.
So, Jim, around what year was it that this occurred?
It was 1976.
1976. So do you think that they knew about this craft?
Quite obviously they did. I mean, they said they wanted to show me something, and that's what they showed me. They wouldn't explain it. I asked them, please, what is this? What the heck is this thing?
Now, one of the things that you mentioned the last, sorry for interrupting you, but one of the things that you mentioned in the last time that we thought we was recording was that your children was there, but they don't remember, and they were approximately how old again?
They were probably about 4 and 5. They were just little boys, but, they saw the thing just like I did.
It was 2 friends who took you up there, correct?
And one of them has since died, and he was just a normal human being. But
okay.
Anyway, I always, for years, I thought he was a hybrid because he had this incredible IQ, and he seemed to know everything about the astronomy. And anyway, he wouldn't explain what this thing was. He told me he had to get back home, and he drove me and my boys back up to my house. And all the way there, I'm trying to get him to explain to me what the heck that thing was, or how did he do that? How did he bring that thing down? He wouldn't explain anything to me. And so after that, I did the concert, and then I moved to California because there's so many people out there, it's easy to sell out concerts. And I found out that nobody was promoting the Valley, but Mafia had L.A. and Bill Graham had San Francisco. So I took the Valley, and for 15 years, I promoted concerts in the Valley from Stockton, Fresno, and Bakersfield. I'd run bands through the Valley.
So you're actually pretty well known and connected.
Yeah. Anyway, one night I was in California, and I was laying in bed thinking about a business deal I was working on, when suddenly this voice started speaking to me, and it was these aliens, and they told me that they'd been with me all my life, and that they were the ones that were coming and getting me when I was in elementary school. And they said that they'd been with me my whole life, and the reason was because of my genetics. They said that I have a rare survival gene that only Native Americans have, and I have a Apache, Comanche, and Cherokee in me. They told me a whole lot of things about my life, and there was a time in my life when I had this serious problem, and I prayed to God to help me and give me an answer for this problem. And this voice spoke to me, and I thought it was God speaking to me. Well, they told me that it wasn't God speaking to me, it was them, and that they had solved my problem for me, which was, this was all pretty shocking. And anyway, I asked them, where are you? And they said they were above my house in a craft. And they told me that the earth was going to go through some really rough times, and a lot of people were going to die, that there were going to be floods and disasters of every kind on major scale. There would be floods, hurricanes, famines, droughts, you name it, it's all going to happen. And they wanted me to tell people about this, and they wanted me to tell people that they were real and that they exist. And the reason is because when the Earth, there's going to be polar shifts. Everything you can imagine is going to happen. And a lot of this stuff has already happened. A lot of it's already started happening. And they said that they would try to save as many of us as they could because they said that we are their children, that they put us here. And they said the reason they don't come down and land and say, here we are and solve all our problems is because the human mind is not evolved enough to accept the reality of their existence, which makes a lot of sense. So I have spent my life telling people about them and trying to prepare them for this end times, because they told me that most people would go insane when they do come down.
Now, some of the things that you were saying is, from my understanding, is true to a point. So I can kind of understand or kind of realize that you might be onto something, like the polar shifting. For example, I know for a fact that there's an airport around where I live. They have these numbers. The numbers on the runway also are indications of where they are on the Earth. Because of the polar shifting, they actually had to change their numbers because the polarity has weakened, and the numbers are slowly shifting around the world.
Right.
I studied that a little while ago.
Started.
Yeah,
it's already started.
And it's not the first time this has happened.
No.
when it comes to polar shifting. That's pretty interesting.
Well, anyway, I was on the road with Willie Nelson for we were at Lake Tahoe at the time, actually, and we finished the show, and we were all up in the Star Suite, and Willie's Star Suite, and we were listening to a recording of the show, which is what we did after the show every night. You know, we were there for 10 days, and I think this was like our 9th day, and so we were tired of listening to the recordings of the show. And Willie pulled out his wallet, and he pulled out this phone number. This is when Jimmy Carter was president, and he said, Jimmy Carter gave me this phone number, and he said I could call him anytime, day or night, and he'd answer this number. And it was probably 3 o'clock in the morning in California, and so he called Jimmy Carter, and he answered the phone. And so Willie told Jimmy Carter a joke, and then Jimmy Carter would tell us a joke because Willie put it on speakerphone. And we sat there and listened to Willie and Jimmy tell jokes for about 30 minutes and just laughed our butts off. And then Jimmy Carter invited Willie to come to play the White House the next night. And he said he would send Air Force One to Reno and send the Secret Service people over to vet everybody and fly us to the White House and do that show. I wasn't able to go, so I asked Willie to do me a favor. I told him, I said, Jimmy Carter made a campaign promise that if he was elected president, he would release all the information the government had on UFOs. Well, he got to be president. He didn't release the information. So I asked Willie to ask him why he didn't do that. Well, Willie went to the White House, and he came back, and he told me that Jimmy Carter told him that, yes, UFOs were real, but that he could not release that information because it would cause mass hysteria, panic, and the stock market would crash, and there wouldn't anything good would come from it. So that's Jimmy Carter saying they're real. So anyway, and then these aliens told me that they wanted me to move to Taos, New Mexico. So I did. They told me that the Indians own a big mountain there. The Navajos own this huge mountain, and they call it the Magic Mountain. And nobody can set foot on it except for the Indians. If you do, you disappear. I've never mentioned this on a radio show, at least, because I didn't know whether they wanted me to give their location away. But I saw a thing on TV the other night it was a show called Aliens, The Untold Story, I think is what it was. And this guy actually mentioned Taos, New Mexico. And it was the first time I'd heard anybody mention it. So I feel like that I can mention it now. They had underground bases all over the planet, but their main base was in Taos, New Mexico. And,
so this is a lot of information that you have, Jim. So I guess let's kind of dial it back a second, and let's go back to the Jimmy Carter and Willie Nelson connection. Was there any time during that period that you shared this information, let's say, with Willie Nelson?
Oh, sure. I told Willie all my stories. Yeah, he knows all about them, too.
Is it something that you guys shared as far as a shared belief that, what your experience was and whether or not that not just Willie, but everyone around you, do they actually kind of believe in what you're telling them as far as your experiences?
I have a lot of friends all over the country, and they've all heard my stories, and I believe they all believe me, and they're all still my friends, and they all say they believe me. And I'm an honest person. I honestly am. I've tried to be a righteous person my whole life, and something that added to that was, they taught me how to reach a state of consciousness known as the Christ consciousness state. And once you get into that level of consciousness, they call it that because you can do anything that Jesus can do. You can perform any miracles, you can heal, you can affect the weather, you can do anything. And, they told me actually that all humans have the ability to do this. We just don't know it. And you have to reach this level of consciousness to be able to do it. So I spent quite a bit of time being Jesus, and it was an interesting experience. I healed several people, and I've been fortunate. I made quite a bit of money in the music business, and I've helped a lot of people that needed help.
You was talking about Jimmy Carter, and he was in his campaign of bringing out the full disclosure of the UFOs. Now, Hillary Clinton is now doing that. Have you heard about that?
No, I have not.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton is saying that if she is elected president, she is going to put in a full disclosure, and she's really trying really hard right now. What do you think about that?
I'm all for it. I hope she can do it, and I really feel like that. The people are ready for this.
I mean, do you think it's more propaganda, trying to win a campaign? Because a lot of people believe that the government is hiding something, or do you feel like she has, a best interest into trying to get that information out there?
I'm not sure, but I'm sure that she's going to find out if she gets elected president and they brief her on UFOs. She's not going to say anything because it's just too much of a risk.
Why do you think that?
Because I've been around people who have been around me when there's UFOs around me, and I've seen how it affects them. And some people just totally snap and freak totally out. And other people actually, even though the UFO is right in front of them, it's like they don't even see it. It's like they won't acknowledge it. Their brain won't allow them to acknowledge it. And I've seen this happen a lot of times, and with people that I really thought could handle it. I had one friend in California, a highly intelligent guy, and he was always after me to bring a UFO down for him, and which is something I can do. So one day I decided maybe he really was ready. So I called him and asked him to come on over. And it was a beautiful day out in California. And I had an orchard. I lived out in the country. And he got to my house and we walked out behind my barn. And between my barn and the orchard is about 20 yards of sand. Nothing but sand, clean sand. And so we're standing out there and there's nothing around us. There's no trees around us. There's no buildings, within 10 feet of us. I asked him if he was ready and he said he was. And the next thing I know, I'm going straight up in the air. I'm looking down at my friend and he's looking all around looking for me because I just suddenly disappeared. And I went up pretty high. I went up high enough that I tried to holler at him and he couldn't hear me. He went into a panic and he ran all out. He ran out to the road to his car and jumped in his car and spun out and drove to his house, which was about probably 10 miles away. And I could see him. I was high enough up in the air to watch him drive all the way home. And I saw how he drove home. And at that point, I suddenly realized I'm up in the air. And I looked up and there was a UFO right above me, and I was just about to go up in a hole in the middle of it. And I panicked. And the minute I panicked, they started letting me down, and I went slowly down to the ground. And as soon as I got to the ground, the UFO took off, and I went in the house and called my friend, and I said, "Why did you run off? Why did you take off?" And he said, "You were standing right next to me, and you disappeared." And he said, "I couldn't figure that out." He said, I don't know, I just panicked. And I told him, I said, all you had to do is look up. There was a UFO right above you, and I was up there right by it. And I told him I'd watched him drive home and how he went home, what roads he took. And he said, "Damn, he should have stayed. He should have looked up." It's like some people are not ready, and they know they're not ready, and so they don't push it.
Now, have you ever documented any of these encounters in any way, shape, or form? Have you ever documented like any video, audio of encountering with the UFOs or anything like that?
No, other than seeing them with friends. I've documented them that way. I've had friends with me when they were present, but I asked them one time if it was okay for me to take pictures of their craft. And they told me, sure. So we went out and my wife and I went out and bought a new camera. And every time they would appear, we would be so, I don't know, just stunned by it. I mean, I've seen them so many times, and I never failed to be just totally blown away by it. But we would not think to take a picture. It just wouldn't even occur to us. I don't know if they had something to do with that or not. Anyway, like I said, they had me moved to Taos, New Mexico. And they told me that inside this magic mountain is a golden pyramid, and inside the golden pyramid is the body of Jesus Christ. And the mountain range that this mountain is a part of is called the Sangre de Cristo Mountains, the blood of Christ. Nobody seems to know why that is. But there's a lake on top of this mountain, and the UFOs they enter the mountain through this lake. And, I live there. So, and everybody that lives there watches these UFOs go in and out of that mountain all the time. But, first thing I did was I went to see the Navajo medicine man, their shaman. And I told him I had one question for him. He was really a unique being. He was 65 years old, and he had long, great pigtails. And he had steel blue eyes, and he's full-blood Navajo. But, I asked him, what's inside the mountain? And he looked at me and smiled, and he said, inside the magic mountain is a golden pyramid. And inside the golden pyramid is the body of Jesus Christ, which is exactly what I was told. So, anyway, I go back on the road with Willie and with other bands I was promoting. At another time, I'm back up in Lake Tahoe with Willie. It was our best gig. It was a 10-day gig. And so we're in one place for 10 days, which is nice. But we just finished the show. These beings contacted me. They spoke to me telepathically all the time. And they told me they needed me to be in Taos the next night. So I would have to get up and drive all day to get there. They told me they would be with me all the way to Taos, and they were. A cloud actually flew right alongside the road, right with us all the way there. They just disguised themselves as a cloud. Anyway, we get to the Taos. We drive all the way to Taos. It's a long drive. We get there, it's dark. And we check into the Taos Inn, which at the time was a 150-year-old adobe inn. And I'd stayed there a lot of times in the same room. And we went in with sleep because we were worn out from the trip. We woke up the next morning, and there was all this orange fluid all over the bed. It was running off the bed onto the carpet, and there was a lot of it. And we got to looking, and it was coming out from between my wife's legs. And she totally went into shock and just freaked out and demanded that I take her to a doctor. And I told her everything was okay, that they had taken a 3-month-old fetus from her, and they can take a fetus and raise it from 3 months. This was the second child that they had taken from me. But she still didn't, she still wasn't buying into that. So she made me take her to the hospital. She cleaned up. I took her to the hospital, and they checked her out. They couldn't find anything wrong or anything unusual. And we told them about the orange fluid, and they said, well, go back and get a sample of it and bring it to us, and we'll find out what it is. So we went back to the room, and just as we got there, these Indians cleaned the rooms, and this group of Indians were coming out of the room just as we got there. And I stopped them, and I said, did you just clean the room? And they nodded their heads yes to me. And I said, what about the orange fluid that was all over everything? What about that? This one lady shook her head no to me. And so I took off running for the room and looked in there, and it was completely cleaned up. So then I turned back around and tried to chase down the Indians, and they were gone. I could not find them. They cleaned that stuff up, the Indians are completely aware of them. They know all about them. They protect them. So that was they took a child from us, and they told me that it was a blue-eyed, blonde-haired girl, and that I would get to meet her someday.
So, Jim, was the hospital able to confirm that your wife was, in fact, at the time, carrying a child at the time?
No, they could not. They couldn't verify that at all. I had noticed, in fact, I have a picture which shows it. I had noticed that she was getting a little paunch, a very small paunch, but, she and I were very healthy. We ran every day. We ran up mountains. And so we were in real good shape. So, I thought I saw that picture of her in that bikini, and I thought, what? Her stomach is sticking out a little bit. That's strange. And then right after that is when they took the baby. And they explained to me that they could take it at 3 months and raise it from there. And they're doing this because of my genetics and my wife's genetics. Her father was full-blood Cherokee. They said that they put me together with, I've been married my whole life to a whole lot of different women. And they told me that they put me together with all of my wives because they all also had Native American genetics, and apparently our genetics are very important to them.
So, Jim, it's interesting, too, that you're saying Taos, New Mexico, because apparently that's only 2 hours away from Dulce, New Mexico, where a lot of people are saying that there's an underground base that holds a lot of alien species in there that the military is involved with.
That's right, and it's on another Indian reservation as well. But, I've always kept the Taos thing quiet because I'd never heard it mentioned before. But like I said, I heard this guy talking about Dulce, and he mentioned that they also have a base in Taos. So it's out, so it's okay for me to say that, I'm sure. Or they would already have stopped this radio show again.
Does your wife believe you and your family? Do they, now that your kids are older, obviously,
Yeah, they still don't remember to this day. And I actually had them when I was living in California, and the boys were older. They were still young, they were probably 7 and 9, something like that. And I'd have to think hard to come up with the exact age, but they were about like that when these beings started communicating with me. And I asked them if they would come down and where I could show my kids their craft and explain to them, that they were going to be coming down and saving their lives someday. And they said, sure. And the very next day, I was in my house watching TV with my 2 boys, and my neighbor's babysitter knocked on my door, and she asked me where my neighbors were at. And I told her that they'd gone to the grocery store, but they'd be right back. I said, you're welcome to wait in here in the air conditioning until I get back. So she came in and was sitting down there watching TV with us, when we suddenly heard this unbelievably loud noise coming from outside. It sounded like somebody was landing a jet helicopter in my backyard. So we ran out into the backyard, and this is about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we go out in the backyard, and there's this huge spacecraft, and it's a block long. It's as long as my block, and it's just right over us, and it's not making a sound. It went dead silent when we went outside. Apparently, they made that noise to get us to come outside. So, one of my boys, it scared him so bad, he ran back into the house. My other boy grabbed me and was holding on to me and just shaking. And so I went back in the house and got my other boy and dragged him back outside. And they're both holding on to me. And we're looking up at this spacecraft. And I explained everything to them about them that I knew. And then the spaceship took off and just shot off into the sky. And that's when I noticed that the babysitter, my neighbor's babysitter, was standing there in the backyard, and she had seen the whole thing too. And I walked over to her and tried to talk to her, and she couldn't talk. It's like she was in a state of shock. So at that point, she lived about 5 blocks away, and I knew she would need to be babysitting in the condition she was in. So I offered to walk her home, which I did, and I tried talking to her all the way home, and she would not respond. It's like she was in a state of shock.
Now, you said that you have an Indian friend, and you're in constant communication with him. Is there any way that me, Manny, you, and your friend could come on the show?
Yeah, that's the last thing he wants. That is absolutely. I have several friends that are in the filmmaking business, and I had a German filmmaking crew come to my ranch, and they spent 5 days filming me while I would tell my UFO stories. And I had a Choctaw Indian friend of mine who was also here, a filmmaker, was in on that deal. But, I told him about my alien friend, and of course they wanted to meet him. So I called him and asked him if he'd be willing to come over and talk to these filmmakers. And he just flipped out. He said, oh no. He said, don't do that to me, Jim. He said, don't ever do that to me. He said, that's, can't happen. And so, and they were standing right there when I was talking to him. So
where's there any, because you have an experience with more than one encounter with an extraterrestrial at this point? Were they a different mindsets? Like one of them wants to tell everybody everything, or the other one doesn't want you to say nothing to anybody? I mean, what's the point of you coming on here and telling your story?
Well, it's to prepare people for what's going to happen to this planet and to let them know that there are good aliens out there that are going to try to save us. They told me they were from the Pleiadians star system, and they told me there were other aliens here. I should avoid them, and that they would protect me from them, from the other aliens.
So, Jim, have they ever mentioned exactly how many different species of extraterrestrials are visiting the Earth at this point?
They've never mentioned that to me, but of course, I've read that the government has a book with pictures of over 500 different species that have visited this planet, and they communicated with all of them. Our government has, and some of them are evil, as anybody that's read about Dulce, will know, and they're considered the reptilians. The ones that I've communicated with, they look just like you and me, and they live amongst us. There's no telling how many of them are on this planet, but there's a large amount of them. And I just here recently, I moved to this ranch in Central Texas, and shortly after I moved here, I was sitting on the porch one night and I noticed this golden orb moving through the sky. And I thought, well, that must be a satellite because it wasn't blinking or anything. It was just a golden sphere moving through the night sky. And then suddenly it stopped. And I thought, it's not a satellite. And then I saw why it stopped. It was a military jet coming right at it. And it didn't move until the jet got almost right to it, and then it just disappeared. And so I started watching every night. And every night I would see these golden spheres. And I have a 20 million candle power spotlight. And I had read somewhere that if you had flashed them a certain sequence, that they would respond. So I tried flashing this 20 million candle power spotlight at them, and I didn't get a response. They would stop, and they'd be cruising over me, and they would stop, and I would flash them, and then they would turn and go somewhere else. But I shot this spotlight at them 2 nights in a row and got no response. The third night, I forgot to bring the spotlight down to the guest house, the orbs from the east, and it got almost over me, and it stopped, and it flashed a giant blue flash at me, and I didn't have my spotlight to flash it back. But that kind of surprised me that they did that on the third night after I'd flashed them 2 nights in a row, and then it just shot off into the sky.
So one last,
since I've lived here, I've probably seen over 100 different UFOs, and you've talked to Ronnie Dawson, and he's got these videos of these UFOs that he's taken, and he's taken them right down the road from my ranch. Ronnie came to see me after we, a mutual friend hooked us up together, and he brought his wife and 3 kids, and they came in. Ronnie and I sat down and talked for a couple of hours about UFOs, and then they got ready to leave. We walked outside, and I live up on a hill, and so you got a really good look at the sky. And I told Ronnie, I said, you and me being together here tonight, it's a beautiful night. We ought to see a UFO. And about that time, his wife said, "Oh my God, look!" And here comes a white light, coming towards us. It's not blinking; it's just a white light moving through the sky, and it's not all that high, but it's coming towards us, and it comes right over us and stops. And we watched that, and then it took off, and here comes another one, and it went by really fast. And then here comes the third one, and it's moving really slow. And we watched all 3 of those, and then all of a sudden, this incredible thing happened. It was like a bright light and it was low over our heads, and it was moving so fast that the light, it looked like it had a tail of light, like a big ribbon of white light. And it shot over our heads and reversed and went back the other way without stopping. And we went, damn. And then it did it again. It went right over our heads and reversed without stopping. And went back the other direction. I mean, incredibly bright light. So, we saw 5 UFOs within about 10 minutes. And his wife had told me when they got here, she said, I'm still a skeptic. I see these videos and everything, but I've never seen one myself. Well, she saw 5 that night. She's no longer a skeptic. Well, but I've seen some incredible ones. I mean, and they're all different. Most of them are all different. And,
well, that is amazing. I mean, it seems like you have a plethora of information. I think we're going to have you come back on a later show,
because I was recently abducted, and I wouldn't have known it except for a certain reason. If you don't have time for that story, I'll tell it next time.
Oh, that would be even better. Definitely come back. Definitely come back. Maybe we'll make some arrangements, and I got your contact information. And wow, just an amazing story.
Well, like I said, I could write a book, but
I think you should.
I'm trying to just.
Write a book.
There's too much. It'd take me days to tell all the stories.
Well, Jim, I think it's important that you get your story out because there's a lot of people out there who have these experiences and never tell their story. And I think that you can guide them and kind of help them come out of the whole ridicule envelope that keeps them in the dark. We need to hear these stories.
Yeah, a lot of people I tell everybody. So some of the people I tell think, I'm crazy. But, most people that know me that I tell, they believe me because they know that I'm an honest person. Yeah, I'd like to tell you some more stories.
All right, Jim. Well, thank you for joining us today. And like I said, we look forward to hearing from you again, especially any of your recent experiences, because I think our fans would love to hear those.
Yeah, it's pretty shocking. I haven't quite gotten over it yet.
Well, Big O, that was a great interview we just had with Jim Marlin, and I do hope he gets to come back and share more of his experiences because there is no doubt that he has a lot more to share with us. And, historically, he's been in contact with a lot of people in high places, and he's had even more contact with extraterrestrials. Yay. But apparently, this week, we also have a great track that was submitted to us by someone you know.
Yeah, actually, it's one of my good friends, DJ Knox, the MD. He hooked me up with DJ Keys. Now, DJ Keys has a nice track called Passion, and it's going to be nice, smooth, and yet UFO-y.
Well, we want to thank everyone for checking out UFOBusterRadio.com, checking out the podcast, and listening to us week after week. And again, thanks to Jim Marlin, Ronnie Dawson, anyone else that's joined us live. And we welcome anyone else that wants to share this story to join our podcast, join our website, share your story, and let people know what's really going on.
So, for Manny and Big O, ciao.